What does holism mean to you?
Holism means to me is that things are connected. Nothing stands in isolation. So when you look at a tree, you don't just look at a tree. You know the tree exists only because there is a soil. Tree exists only because there is a sunshine. Tree exists only because there is air. So many things make the tree. So just looking at the tree in isolation, without the context, without the holistic view of the surrounding, will be wrong, in my view. So holistic to me means seeing everything in their context, in their whole perspective, rather than in isolation.
That makes a lot of sense to me. But as a scientist who wants to actually understand how the tree works, I would be more inclined to dissect the tree, to think about the molecules of water going up the transpiration stream inside the tree. Think about the sun bearing down upon the leaves, which are kind of solar panels and are being used to catch carbon dioxide out of the air and so on. How do you reconcile those two views of the tree?
There is no contradiction.
Right.
As long as you have in the back of your mind the context of the whole, and within that whole you look at the parts, the detail. So, I mean, for example, you're writing a book. Book is made of every sentence, every word, every syllable, every line, every page. But page is not the book. You have to see the book in the context. But you cannot see the book in the context without reading the page. You cannot read the page without reading the sentence. You cannot read the sentence without reading the words. So details are important, but they are only important within the context of the whole. So if people don't take the holistic perspective and only reduce the book to a page or to a title, then that I would say is wrong. But if the title is to understand the whole, then that reducing the science to its particulars will be useful. So in my view, there is no contradiction.
Right. I would think I'd put exactly the same thing, but I'd probably use the word hierarchy and say that there is a hierarchy of units within units within units. And in order to understand something, at any given level, there's no point going too far down into the details. So if you're, say, trying to understand how a computer works, for example, you know that the computer actually consists of integrated circuits, transistors, and so on, but it doesn't really help you. What you do is you think in terms of large units of software interacting with each other, whereas if you're an engineer who's trying to repair the computer, well, if you're trying to repair the computer, you might well actually take out a whole integrated circuit board, in fact. But finally, you would agree that you can reduce it down to ones and noughts, high voltage, low voltage states in a whole lot of integrated circuits. So that there is an explanation at all levels, but we have to think hierarchically.
I would not think hierarchically. I would think more in terms of network. So things are not higher or lower, but they are spread like a network. So when I say holistically, network is a good example for that, because one unit will not stand by itself, because it will fall down, it will break down. So in the same way, for example, if you take the tree, as I said in the example, tree is made of this network of elements which make the tree. If you take the sun away, the water away, the soil away, the gardener away, the forester away, there will be no tree. Tree is made of so many other elements which are not tree. So tree is made of non-tree elements. And that is why holistic view of the world is a kind of context within which particular detail, particular aspect you can understand better. Otherwise you are working. Why we have in the world today so much trouble? Because we forget the context. And we just take one issue and just tackle that single issue as if everything else is irrelevant. And this is why I think we have many more social crises, political crises. For example, in politics, we take just the terrorism as a separate element without seeing the context. Or we see poverty as a separate element without seeing the context. So without the context, text does not mean anything. text needs context.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see why one wants to say that the tree is an important part of the context of the tree. It's in the soil, it's in the air, there's in the sun, in a whole ecosystem, and very complicated that ecosystem is. I'm not sure it's helpful to say that that's all part of the tree, however. I mean, that, to me, that's a slight misuse of language, because although the tree is sitting in a context, which is an ecological context and a soil context and so on, it's not actually part of the tree. You want to reserve the word tree for the wooden thing which has roots in the ground and has leaves at the top and is planted in the ground.
Yeah, but that's too simplistic. Just to reduce the tree to something but is roots in the ground and standing as a trunk and branches. Because we are, as you scientist, and I as a philosopher, we want to go a bit deeper and broader. We don't want to just be simplistic. We want to say, there is no such thing as tree if you take all those elements away. Because the roots and the branches and the trunk are made of other elements.
I think we're agreeing about everything that matters. I think that our disagreement is only semantic. I think that words need to be used in precise ways, and I fear that that's not such a precise.
I think our difference is more than semantic.
Okay.
Our difference is quite basic, because what I'm saying is there is no such thing as tree in itself. Tree is only tree when we see the whole context in it. And the moment you take the context away, there is no such thing as tree. Because we are stuck with tree, we lose the context, and therefore we can cut a tree thinking there's no problem. But when we are cutting the tree, if we remember the context, we will be very careful when to cut, when not to cut, how to deal with the tree. So the context, the holistic perspective is very fundamental. Whereas quite a lot of scientists, and I'm not saying yourself, but quite a lot of scientists go to a very particular reduced element, and they work only on their specialist aspect. And I think there science goes wrong.